We were, 2 days into the AFL off-season proper, I reckon, and I count the off-season proper as post the trade period. That's when we really go into hibernation. And within a day and a bit of that, we had double drug sagas. We had Carlton recruiting Elijah Hollands 1 minute and releasing a statement the next minute saying that he's due in court on possession of illicit substance. But really the big story was Joel Smith's positive test for an illicit substance on game day, no less, in round 23 of the home and away season that has raised many an eyebrow given the situation that football club finds itself in amid questions over its culture and its off-field behaviours. Max Gawn has spoken, but you would like a few more to speak at that football club.
Well, I would, yeah. I'm blown away by the story, and I spoke about it with Derm. So to think that a player on the eve of a final series or round 23 midweek would get up to this, like it actually blows my mind. I've never sort of seen anything like it, and I mean Melbourne have been extremely dismissive about it. I said on Friday it's not probably something you're doing alone. No, I don't know. It could be with other friends. He might have been alone. I don't know, but I'd want to find out if there were any other Melbourne players there. That would be the first thing that you would want to know, and why one of our players is doing that midweek. And I said it on Friday. Like, you could easily argue that this type of behaviour cost Melbourne a premiership. And you post that quote to social media, and everyone's like, "Oh, there's Kane looking for a headline again." It's not at all. Like, when these margins are so close, and you've got one, I don't know if more, I'd want to find that out, doing this midweek on the eve of a final series where you lose the first final by 7
Can you function
points.
with this happening? So
Well,
West Coast won a premiership with an absolutely rife
off the
drug
rails,
culture at the time.
off the rails. But I
And they're playing in grand
and I
finals
don't
and
know
winning
whether
grand
they
finals.
were doing it midweek. From what I've read about Ben Cousins, he sort of just would go for 4 or 5 weeks, train really hard, and then completely go off the rails for a period there. These are all questions I can't answer, but what I would be doing is treating it incredibly serious. Most clubs, Max, can I tell you that players
Doesn't it?
taking drugs midweek? So this is a Thursday. This is a Wednesday or a Thursday ahead of a Sunday game. Sam.
So the experts would say it stays in the... So it's either Thursday, Friday or Saturday before a Sunday game.
So this does not happen at most clubs. Now, the thought is that, okay, all these players get up to this. Yeah, and that may be true. If I had to guess, and I'd be just guessing, 4 out of 10 players perhaps would indulge in this. Some would say more, but that would be in the off-season, not...
Well, Gary Pert. So, Gary, I'll just pause right here for a second, just on this. Gary Pert in November 2012, now he was the CEO of Collingwood at that time, he made headlines for saying that some players were guilty of volcanic behaviour during the off-season, and he actually called for a forum of all clubs to discuss the problem. Now, that's 11 years ago, Kane. You would say it's probably more prevalent now than it was then. So that points to, well, Gary Pert's been passionate about it in the past. We'd love to hear from him again. But maybe most clubs are. Are we naive
Off-seed.
not to think that?
So that's off-seed. Maybe and I keep saying this, maybe I am naive with this, but I would be astounded if there's many players doing this a couple of days
During the
before
week.
a game. And Max Gawn says this happens at most clubs. Well, no, it doesn't. And at most clubs, your best players don't have significant issues like Clayton Oliver has. So this story from Mark Robinson around Clayton Oliver, one East Melbourne resident recently revealed that Oliver, after a light training session at Yarra Park in the summer of 2022, bent a number of windscreen wipers on cars in a side street. It doesn't happen at most clubs. Your best player doesn't walk down the street bending the windscreens of cars. Like, this doesn't happen. So, and then we've got May and Melksham, and that was just really distasteful what happened after the grand final there. Punch-ups between players at pubs. Like, it doesn't happen. And then we've got the Oliver. Then we've got Smith. Then we've got May speaking like, embarrassing himself at the best and fairest, saying that they would have won the premiership. I know it's in an intimate room, but you got to be smarter than that. He's 31 years of age, Stephen May. So he's had a couple of wines probably and gets up there and makes a fool out of himself. And Max Gawn's sitting here telling us the culture's good, and Simon Goodwin's doing the same. So I think they need to be a bit more honest about where their football club is at. This isn't an isolated event, and it's certainly, I think, incredibly serious, and something drastically wrong is going on with one of your players' lives if he's sitting at home or if he's at a seedy nightclub on a Friday before a Sunday game doing this. This doesn't happen, Max, at every other club.
You mentioned Clayton Oliver before. His behaviour's become impossible to ignore and impossible for Melbourne to protect. They did it for so much of the season upon external advice, given the challenges off-field that Clayton faces, and then it got to a head come the trade period where that advice changed and they really needed to draw a line in the sand with his behaviour and his off-field antics. And he was taken to Footscray Hospital, as Tom Morris told us, during the trade period. He was fitted with a neck brace. He had CT scans. He had X-rays on his chest. He'd done himself some damage. He was released and wasn't picked up by the club either. And I read Mark Robinson's story over the weekend around who he'd been spending the time with going in, which he's reported to be Joel Smith. Well, Joel Smith actually arrived back at the hospital to pick him up as well. So it wasn't a club official, wasn't anyone else aligned to Melbourne. It was Joel Smith who came and picked Clayton Oliver up. So do these guys, are they trying to keep it under lock and key? Are they trying to have their cake and eat it too? All these questions remain. And when you got 44 players on a list, though, Kane, are we naive to think that some players won't be like this?
Maybe, but don't treat us like fools, Max. Don't treat your supporters and the footy world like fools. Clayton's not going really well, as you just said, and you've just described. And now there's been other videos, I don't know when those videos were taken, of Clayton kicking walls in over the weekend. This is what is going to happen. It's, when you've got a target on your back like that, more information is going to come out. So don't stand there, Max, at a function you're paid to be at and tell us that Clayton Oliver is going really well, because we're not stupid. Melbourne fans aren't stupid. You don't explore trading one of, if not your best player, for no reason with 7 years to go on his contract if he's going really well. So where are Melbourne in this? Why is it Max Gawn giving mistruths at a sponsors function that he's paid to be, and it's not senior leadership people of the Melbourne Football Club speaking? Where is Simon Goodwin at the moment? Like, you're on your holidays, but you're never on holidays as an AFL coach. Where's Alan Richardson? Where's the leadership at the footy club? Because, as I said, I just feel like their head is in the sand, and maybe they don't even know how bad the issues are at their footy club.
No, they know. They've got a pretty good idea.
Yeah.
And listening to Max, and I don't even blame Max, because they want to put their arm around Clayton. They want to support him. They want to be the carrot and not the stick, and protect him. And as I said, that has been the advice for that particular player with what he is dealing with. So we almost acknowledge Max, but we park Max because he's compromised.
It shouldn't be up to Max.
He has to support.
There should be more senior. He's the senior captain of the footy club and as good a captain as anyone. But we need. Where's Joel Smith? Did you do it? Did you not? This is the big.
Well, you mentioned
story.
Peter Bowl before. The big difference is Peter Bowl was innocent, and
I know.
And Joel Smith tested positive and will be suspended.
So in that case, cop your medicine and come out and tell us what was going on.
A lot of thoughts, a lot of texts coming through. I've got to read these carefully before we put them to air. The Temper 40 Wings text 0433 98 11 16. 40 Winks serious about sleep. The IMA Insurance open lines 1300 736 736. IMA Insurance, the tradies, mate. And yet for all this, Kane, they finished top 4 3 years in a row. And as someone says here off the text, I doubt we'd be talking about this. This is Stephen. I doubt we'd be talking about this if Melbourne could kick straight. So there's all of that happening in the vast majority of the list, and you do feel for guys like Max Gawn, Christian Petrarca,
Jack
see Viney,
Christian Petrarca,
Jake Lever
weighing his food, and I see him turn up to day one of pre-season with a 10-pack. This Christian Petrarca, there's a picture of him turning up to training last year, and he is ripped to shreds. And I think this guy, he shows us what he eats in a day. You can follow him on social media. He almost weighs his food. He does all his recovery. He's a full professional. And then Jack Viney, you mentioned, and others, like hungry for taste of premiership. I said I would be so angry if I was a Melbourne supporter, because these are the margins. And you lose a game against Collingwood, you have double the entries, you lose by 7, you lose to Carlton by 2, and then you find out that these players midweek is doing this. And that was my argument around, was it enough? And in the margins that are so small to stop you from winning another premiership, because they were good enough clearly to win it.
The good oils for Cobram Estate, of course, Australia's most awarded extra virgin olive oil, grown, harvested and first cold pressed in northern Victoria. We mentioned Trent Cotchin's book extract earlier. Hopefully some other juicy extracts to come, but the one that caught our eye over the weekend, From the Heart, this book is called, by the way. HarperCollins, I think, the publisher, available in all good bookstores, as they say in the classics, Kane, was a takeaway from Damien Hardwick's last game as coach. Dream time at the G, where the coach later admitted that he knew this was going to be his final game, I think, and his motivation was absolutely waning. And he hit the Richmond players right between the eyes after the siren.
He did, and called them spuds and all that. And that was the moment where Trent knew something was up with his coach. Very unusual, way that he was handling a post-match loss like that. The question I've got is, will it be any different at Gold Coast? So this was my scepticism over Damien Hardwick needing a break and then so quickly jumping back in and signing a 5-year contract extension at the Gold Coast. Will this be enough to get him revitalised, or is it? Is it a good retirement plan for him? I didn't have a
problem with this at all. So I think he was stale in that environment with those players, with that messaging. So who's to say you can't get a completely new group in a new environment and have success and have your message sink in and have your methods work?
Well, and that would be the goal, to have success. But what if there isn't success? Like, what the pressure that comes on Gold Coast with this big deal for the 3-time premiership coach to give them finally some relevance
but he wouldn't be
the
thinking
on-field
like that.
performance that they need.
I mean, you know him better than most. He wouldn't be thinking like that. He'd only be thinking it's going to be a success. Hence, in his press conference, he said 80% of the premiership list is in the room.
Yeah, and he did say that, and that is the feeling, like that it's just going to go on now that they've got a very well-credentialed coach. The success is going to follow. He's going to get pretty frustrated if it doesn't. Now, I don't know how it's going to play out for him at the Gold Coast, but just to read through this and Trent saying he was rattled. He'd spoken about his personal challenges, the way that he addressed the group, had me thinking something serious was going on. And then a few weeks off, a trip overseas, and you're ready to go again. So I don't know. I hope for his sake and Gold Coast's sake that they've got the right one. But is he fully up for the fight and how difficult this challenge is going to be of driving Gold Coast to where they need to get? Or, if come round 5 and they're 1-4, are things going to go off track like they did at the end for Richmond? I also did have some sympathy for Hopper and Taranto, and I've spoken about this before, but Trent did mention, part of the large reason that they signed to play for Richmond was to play under Damien Hardwick, and it lasted 9 games. So the fallout for the Tigers as well. I know they've got a new coach, but they've certainly got some playing list challenges. Could be pretty significant as well.
And that is covered off in that Trent Cotchin book as well. The Richmond captain, former Richmond captain, going around and meeting Jacob Hopper and Tim Taranto face to face to talk them through it, because it was a big shock to them, as he acknowledged. They'll be a fascinating watch, the Gold Coast Suns going forward. Melbourne, a lot of pressure on them next year, we've already discussed. Another club under a lot of pressure next year is the Western Bulldogs. Now, they've had a few swings and thrown a few haymakers in the off-season looking to strengthen and change their coaching panel. Alongside Luke Beveridge, who they want to give not greater support, but different support around. We've spoken about that at length. They came really hard and missed on Justin Lepich. What they have done is they've appointed Matthew Egan as well as the club's coaching and performance manager. They've appointed Daniel Pratt, who'd been at the West Coast Eagles for a long, long time under his old teammate Adam Simpson, who will be the defensive coach and in fact take charge of the entire defensive system that the team employs. And then buried right down in here, along with other notes from Amit Baines, the CEO, saying that they'll appoint 2 other senior roles as well, supporting the players and the program, a head of physical performance, a new medical officer, welfare managers and the like, is the acknowledgement that they're looking and they're about to appoint a goal-kicking coach, which caught your eye.
It did catch my eye. So the Western Bulldogs were 17th in the AFL for accuracy at 56.2% last year. I know they're looking for some support for Aaron Norton and to try and get his goal-kicking on track, which sometimes deserts him, as does Ugal Hagen. I think Ugal Hagen's technically a very good set shot, so I don't think there'll be too many issues there. But is there a role for a full-time goal-kicking coach at an AFL club? Now, every fan would go, of course there is. But then, okay, so if you're going to have a goal-kicking coach full-time, that's probably going to cost you, I would think, $150,000 120 to 150,000. What else are you missing from the soft cap? That's masseuses. It could be an extra club doctor, could be IT staff, whatever it is. Because when you look at the Dogs, so 17th for accuracy, but they were okay from the set shot. So can a goal-kicking coach work on the snaps? So the Bulldogs kick 58-48 from snaps. Can they work on the shots from on the run, which was the Bulldogs' one of their biggest weaknesses, 38-46 goals on the run. In play, 99-96 was the accuracy. From free kicks, 42-16. So they would have a deep dive at all this. Where are we missing from? I can tell you that the Western Bulldogs from outside 50, just to the left, are hopeless on 50. 4-12 they kicked from that position. Can a goal-kicking coach work on snaps when a player is so under so much pressure, and can you replicate that pressure at training with a goal-kicking coach? Because it's not just the set shots. As I said, the Western Bulldogs were pretty good from set shots, about mid-table, about 9th or 10th.
Yeah.
So it's a big investment for an area that I don't know whether it's uncontrollable or not. Can you replicate the fatigue, the pressure that is required to execute a snap? And we saw some of the best snaps you've ever seen on grand final day. And that was a big difference in the result of the game. But yeah, look, I'm not critical of it. I think it's good, and I think if it works, every club will follow, and clubs have certainly done that in the past.
Yeah,
but how much of an impact?
Did you have one? Did you have one in your plan?
Usually, no. We had like consultants, goal kicking consultants that would come in and spend some time with you. They'd come in for a couple of weeks and film you, and you'd review it. But then it was largely left to the assistant coaches to work your way through with them.
Like who? Who's a goal-kicking consultant?
Ben Perkins, his name was, the goal-kicking whisperer. He'd done a lot of work with actually the Wallabies, to be honest. He listens, a big fan of the program, and he just loves and he's passionate about goal-kicking, a left-field thinker. But there's Anton Grabak was another one that is sort of a legendary figure that did a lot of work technically with goal kicking over the journey. So there are some out there, and with
it's funny though.
Some of
it is the one thing. It is the one thing that hasn't improved over time. And I know it's not apples and apples, but you go back over time. I was speaking to Kelvin Moore for This Is Your Journey in the weekend. He played with Peter Hudson. Now, you look at Peter Hudson's return in the 70s, 727 goals, 330 behinds. The bloke never missed, but the game, safe to say, was a heck of a lot. He's having his shots from closer, from in front. He's not being required to run to half-back to defend and then sprint back to the forward line.
Exactly.
All these things, yeah. So, I mean, technique, that's why I wonder, is it more psychology that goes into finishing than it is technique?
Perhaps. And, I mean, as I've said, you just got to break down every scenario, and the club would have all that data on it. And most people think, well, why wouldn't every club have a goal-kicking coach? We'll see how that works for the Dogs. The role of Matthew Egan is interesting as well, Sammy. So the position... Yep. We'll see him perform a range of administrative functions in supporting Chris Grant, is the executive director of football, but also there to support the coach, Luke Beveridge. It feels like he's there to manage Luke Beveridge in a way, the way that this has been written. So in terms of a director of coaching and making sure the coaching group is functioning to the full ability, because I think the club would admit that hasn't been the case recently.
Well, he's seen a lot in the game. So he's gone from development coach to assistant coach to all sorts of roles at Essendon. He was interim senior coach there at the end of 2015. So he comes in well credentialed. He wasn't their main man, the Dogs, but I think he's the right man given the situation. And you're right, the support for Luke Beveridge, they wanted it to change. They wanted him to be challenged, Luke Beveridge. So you wouldn't say... the cart was leading the horse, but they wanted Luke Beveridge to be properly challenged in a respectful way, mind you, not just keep going along and swimming along with the long-time assistants that have there. So almost to the case where anyone who was super, super close with him has been pushed to the side, and they're brought in a different level of support. So they've had to bring Luke Beveridge along for the ride in many senses, because he's had a lot of questions, as you would understand. What is going on here? Am I on an island? And they've had to step him through that, which there's been some hard conversations. They're all aligned now. They're all on board. The proof will be in the pudding when the whips start cracking.
You think he's had input into this? Do you think Luke Beveridge has had input into these appointments, Pratt and
I think he's
Egan?
more been brought along and told the direction that they're going, and he has been supportive of that. So they've put in front of him the sort of people they've been going for, and he's been supportive of that. I'm not sure There's been total collaboration with, if you're asking me, Bevo saying we should go for that guy, and the club saying yes. I think it's been more the other way, but he's been supportive.
I think they're all on the same page now that this is a top 4 list because the CEO, Amit Bain, says, yep, this is a top 4 list. I don't think Sam Power could have done much more in assembling this list, whereas towards the back end of the year, Luke Beveridge is going, well, that may be the belief, but those that believe that perhaps aren't as informed in football as to where our list is at. So the club and the coach are on different pages of how good this list is. Do you think they're all aligned on that now, that this has to be a top 4 list?
Well, I'm not sure why it would change because they've only got stronger, haven't they?
Yeah.
They haven't got weaker.
No.
They've added over the trade period around the edges, and their young key position guys are only going to get better. We're going to see more of Darcy. We're going to see more of Jamara. Tim English is in his absolute prime. The Bont is in his absolute prime. They've addressed some needs. I can't see how they can not be a top 4 list if they were a top 4 list this year.
Yeah, no, I agree with that. So that will be interesting. And they got a lot to do, Stuart. So we're October the 23rd. They've got a new medical officer, new head of physical performance, which is a big job to prepare and work out how the group's program is going to look like through the preseason. And a goal-kicking coach. What do you think? 0433 98 11 16. Should every club have a goal-kicking coach, or are there some factors in football that are hard to control, like fatigue, the pressure that you're under, the snaps, the position you're having your shots from? Give us your thoughts on how much that can be controlled.
I've got a bit of a beef as well with the AFL reportedly, canvassing the idea of this Sydney-centred split round to open the 2024 season. I wanted to ask you about this because at the heart of it is GWS's aim and goal, and I listened to Dave Matthews with Dwayne Russell, I think it was, last week on how bullish the Giants were of wanting and why they wanted to face Collingwood and who wouldn't on a Saturday night to open the season. I get all that, but I struggle to get my head around the fact that the reigning premier should be made to go on the road in round 1 of an AFL season when they could be, and in my mind should be, playing at home, full house, 90,000 there, unfurl the flag.
You want them to play at home again because they don't get enough home games.
Have your ratio of away games as you should, but for the Premier, if it's Port Adelaide, if it's West Coast, if it's Collingwood, if it's Richmond, the Premier should get the right to open the season in front of their own fans.
But if
surely
you're trying to build this game in Sydney,
send someone else up there.
Well, but there isn't someone else. You want the
What do you
biggest,
mean there isn't someone else?
You want the highest drawing club.
Send another big club up there, like a Carlton or a Richmond or a
Collingwood is the club.
What?
If you're going to make this an event and you're going to build this, you have to build it with the biggest and the best. And I think Collingwood will be okay to jump on a plane.
Of course they
for
will.
one of 6 times that they travel all year.
You're taking me down a path that I agree with you on already.
So
have your quota of away games. I'm just saying the first one.
If you're going to do it, you've got to do it right. And to do it right, you need the biggest club involved.
I like the fact that they smell blood in the water and they're going for it, the AFL. So if the NRL are in Vegas, then absolutely. And give Sydney a chance. Because I think the fixturing in the year just gone was off in that regard.
What do you think about the Queensland games as well, though? So the fact that Carlton won't open up the season, your club, won't open up the season against Richmond.
I'm not hung up on the Carlton-Richmond season opener. I mean, I'm not. It works.
Does it dilute that, the fact that the Blues are going to play their first game in Queensland? Does it dilute that?
Possibly a little bit.
Of the
but
season?
I reckon, I think so. Yeah, there's a real appetite for that in Melbourne. You can feel it, and there's always 80 to 90,000 there, regardless of how optimistic we are about either of those sides. It's always packed. So if Richmond open up the season and get pumped, and then Carlton has to play them in round 2 or 3 or whenever it is, then I'm sure.
I think he's making some good moves. Andrew Dillon, I've liked what he's done. So I think this is innovative. I like the fact that they're doing it and trying something different. Love the fact they're cracking down on long-term contracts, so doing that. And I love the fact that they're cracking down on club injury reports as well. So some little things that he's made already, because that was an absolute joke, what clubs, how they were reporting their injuries. So
Medium term, short term, long term.
Just disgraceful. So
I like
what he's done.
Yeah, and you've been in his ear. There's no doubt about it. But one thing I would say is just you win the premiership. Good on you for winning the premiership. On the road you go straight away. Pack your bags. Play in front of 20,000.
They'll be okay.
Play in front of 20,000.